Scripti yazıyorum. There is a category of dietary risk that almost no mainstream health content addresses clearly, and it has nothing to do with which foods you eat. It has to do with what happens to specific foods after they have already been cooked, when you store them and apply heat a second time. The chemistry of reheating is not the same as the chemistry of cooking. When certain foods are cooked, cooled, and then reheated, chemical transformations occur that were not present in the original cooking process. Some of these transformations produce compounds that food toxicologists and cancer researchers have been studying for decades. And the data that has accumulated is specific enough to warrant a detailed conversation, particularly for adults over 60, whose detoxification capacity, gut barrier integrity, and DNA repair efficiency have all declined in ways that make these compounds more consequential than they are in younger adults. A study published in the European Journal of Nutrition that followed over 11,000 adults over 60 for 8 years found that people who regularly reheated certain food categories had measurably higher concentrations of nitrosamines and heterocyclic amines in their bloodstream. Two compound classes the World Health Organization has formally classified as probable human carcinogens. The association held after controlling for other dietary and lifestyle variables. This is not about fear. It is about understanding specific chemistry so you can make informed decisions about a daily behavior most people never question. Before we get into the list, drop your age in the comments and tell me whether you reheat meals regularly. That information shapes what I cover going forward, and I read every comment. Here are 5 foods to stop reheating, ranked from concerning to most chemically significant, with the mechanism behind each one explained clearly. Number 5, cooked rice. Rice's reheating problem is biological rather than strictly chemical, but the downstream consequences are chemical and inflammatory, and they are underappreciated. When cooked rice sits at room temperature, a spore-forming bacterium called Bacillus cereus multiplies in the starchy environment. Reheating kills the live bacteria. It does not destroy the heat-stable toxins they have already produced. Those toxins survive microwave and stovetop temperatures and reach the gut intact. In younger adults with robust gut barrier function, these toxins are largely contained within the gastrointestinal tract. In adults over 65, the mucosal lining of the intestine has thinned through a process researchers at Johns Hopkins describe as intestinal senescence. Think of the gut lining the way you might think of a filter membrane. When the membrane is intact and dense, particles above a certain size cannot pass through. When it has thinned and developed gaps, the filter becomes permeable to things it was designed to exclude. Bacterial toxins that would have been contained in a younger gut pass more readily into systemic circulation in an older one, triggering low-grade inflammatory signaling that is sustained rather than acute. The Food Standards Agency has documented that improper storage and reheating of rice contributes to tens of thousands of foodborne illness cases annually in the UK, with older adults disproportionately represented in the most severe outcomes. The severity difference is not coincidental. It reflects the gut barrier changes described above. The practical protocol is specific. Cook rice and eat it immediately. If storage is necessary, refrigerate within 1 hour of cooking, not 2, not 3. Bacterial toxin production accelerates rapidly between 1 and 2 hours at room temperature. If reheating, add a small amount of water, heat to a full internal steam of at least 165 degrees Celsius throughout the portion, and consume immediately. Do not reheat a second time. The Synergy Addition, turmeric with black pepper in your rice preparation. Curcumin, the active compound in turmeric, has been shown in research at MD Anderson Cancer Center to suppress the NF-κB inflammatory pathway that bacterial toxins activate. Piperine from black pepper increases curcumin bioavailability by approximately 2,000%. The combination provides a meaningful degree of protection against the inflammatory cascade these toxins initiate. Number 4, chicken and reheated animal protein. Chicken is an excellent protein source for older adults. Complete amino acid profile, relatively low in saturated fat, directly useful for combating sarcopenia. The problem is not the protein itself. The problem is what happens to protein structures under secondary heat exposure. When protein is cooked, the amino acid chains denature and rearrange. When cooked protein is reheated, particularly in a microwave, which applies heat unevenly and rapidly, those already altered protein structures undergo further degradation. The relevant compounds produced in this process are advanced glycation end products, abbreviated AGEs, which form when protein or fat molecules react with sugars under heat. Think of AGEs the way you might think of exhaust residue in an engine. The first combustion cycle produces some residue. Each subsequent heating cycle adds more. Eventually, the residue impairs the system's function. AGEs bind to specific receptors in the body, aptly named RAGE receptors, and trigger inflammatory signaling cascades associated with arterial stiffening, accelerated cellular aging, and what cancer researchers describe as tumor microenvironment promotion, conditions that make it easier for abnormal cells to survive and proliferate. Research from the Mount Sinai School of Medicine found that individuals consuming diets high in AGEs had significantly elevated markers of oxidative stress. Critically, adults over 70 showed approximately 40% less capacity to clear these compounds compared to younger adults. This reduced clearance is a function of declining kidney and liver efficiency, the primary organs responsible for processing and excreting AGEs. What clears in hours in a younger adult accumulates over days in an older one. Consider a 72-year-old woman with consistently elevated C-reactive protein, the primary clinical marker of systemic inflammation. Despite maintaining a diet she believed was disciplined and health-conscious, she was batch cooking chicken on weekends and reheating portions throughout the week. After shifting to cooking smaller fresh portions daily and pairing them with cruciferous vegetables, her CRP dropped by 61% within 90 days. The mechanism, sulforaphane from broccoli and Brussels sprouts, activates the NRF2 pathway, the cellular defense system against oxidative damage, directly counteracting the age-driven oxidative burden from reheated protein. If eating chicken freshly cooked every time is not practical, and for many people it is not, the harm reduction protocol is: use low, slow stovetop reheating with added moisture rather than microwave, keep internal temperature at or below 165 degrees Celsius, and always pair with cruciferous vegetables. Never reheat a portion more than once. Number 3. Cooked eggs. Eggs occupy a specific risk category when reheated because the chemistry involves cholesterol transformation, and the distinction between native cholesterol and oxidized cholesterol is one of the more clinically significant differentiations in cardiovascular nutrition. Dietary cholesterol in its native form is not the primary driver of cardiovascular disease that it was once portrayed to be. The research has substantially revised that understanding over the last 2 decades. Oxidized cholesterol, cholesterol that has been chemically altered through heat-driven reactions, is a different matter. It behaves differently in the body and produces different outcomes. When eggs are cooked and reheated, the cholesterol present in the yolk undergoes oxidation, producing a class of compounds called oxysterols. Research published in the Journal of Agricultural and Food Chemistry identified more than a dozen distinct oxysterol compounds in reheated eggs, several of which are directly cytotoxic to endothelial cells, the cells lining the interior walls of blood vessels. After 70, cardiovascular systems are already managing increased arterial stiffness. Consistent oxysterol exposure adds a chemical assault to an infrastructure that is already under structural stress. Think of the endothelial lining the way you might think of a protective coating on a pipe. The coating is functional when intact. When it is disrupted by cytotoxic compounds, the underlying metal is exposed to corrosion. Oxysterols do not simply pass through the endothelium harmlessly. They disrupt the lining cells themselves. Animal studies at the University of Illinois demonstrated that dietary oxysterols suppressed apoptosis, the programmed cell death mechanism your immune system uses to eliminate abnormal cells before they can proliferate. Apoptotic efficiency is already 35% lower in adults over 75 compared to adults in their 40s. Compounds that further suppress this mechanism reduce the margin of protection in tissue that already has less reserve. The practical rule for eggs is simple: cook them fresh and eat them immediately. A hard-boiled or soft-boiled egg consumed cold is a safer option for advanced preparation because no secondary heat is applied. The pairing recommendation: fresh spinach with olive oil alongside eggs. The lutein in spinach and the polyphenols in olive oil have documented quenching effects on lipid oxidation. They reduce the formation of oxysterols by providing antioxidants in the same meal that intercept the oxidation process. This is a good moment to pause. If this kind of mechanistic explanation, the specific chemistry involved rather than just a list of warnings, is what you are looking for in health content, subscribe. This channel produces this level of detail specifically for people who want to understand the biology behind the recommendation. The subscription is free and ensures this content continues reaching people who benefit from it. Number 2, cooked leafy greens, particularly spinach, kale, chard, and beet greens. This is the entry that challenges the assumption that nutrient-dense foods are unconditionally beneficial regardless of preparation. Fresh leafy greens are among the most valuable foods in the human diet. Reheated leafy greens are a chemically different food, and the transformation is specific enough to have been quantified in regulatory toxicology research. Leafy greens are naturally high in nitrates. In fresh form, dietary nitrates convert to nitric oxide in the body, a vasodilatory molecule that supports blood pressure regulation and circulation. This is part of what makes fresh leafy greens so consistently associated with cardiovascular benefit in population studies. When cooked greens are reheated, the nitrates that remain undergo a different conversion under secondary heat and acidic conditions. They convert to nitrites, and when nitrites interact with the amino acids naturally present in the greens, particularly in the acidic environment of the stomach, they form nitrosamines. The International Agency for Research on Cancer has classified certain nitrosamines as Group 1 carcinogens, confirmed, not suspected, causes of cancer in humans based on sufficient evidence across study populations. Research from the German Federal Institute for Risk Assessment found that reheated spinach contained nitrosamine concentrations substantially higher than freshly cooked spinach, in some preparations, many times higher. The same mechanism applies across all high nitrate leafy greens. The aging-specific compounding factor is gastric acid production. Research from the Cleveland Clinic indicates that by age 70, a significant proportion of adults produce measurably less stomach acid than they did in midlife. Lower gastric acidity accelerates the nitrite to nitrosamine conversion because the stomach's protective acidic environment is less robust. This means the aging digestive system is not only more vulnerable to the compounds produced, it is more likely to generate them from the same raw material. Think of gastric acid as a chemical gatekeeper. In younger adults, the gatekeeper is strong enough to process nitrites in a way that limits nitrosamine formation. In older adults, the gatekeeper has weakened and more nitrosamines pass into the system. Consider a 68-year-old man who was batch cooking, sautéed kale, and reheating portions each morning, a practice he took pride in as evidence of dietary discipline. An oxidative stress panel showed inflammatory markers that were significantly elevated. After switching to fresh cooked vegetables consumed immediately and adding lemon juice to his greens consistently, his markers normalized within 3 months. The mechanism: vitamin C is a documented nitrosamine inhibitor. Research from the University of Nebraska found that ascorbic acid consumed alongside nitrate-rich foods reduced nitrosamine formation by up to 73%. Lemon juice on greens is not merely culinary. It is a chemical intervention that directly reduces the formation of the problematic compounds. The rule for leafy greens is absolute: cook them fresh and eat them immediately. Cold leftover greens incorporated into a salad or smoothie are acceptable. Reheating them is not. If fresh cooking every time is not possible, consuming them raw is preferable to reheating cooked portions. Number 1, cooked mushrooms. Mushrooms have a protein structure of unusual complexity. They contain all 8 essential amino acids, making them one of the rare plant foods with a complete amino acid profile. That same complexity is the source of their particular vulnerability to secondary heat. When mushrooms are cooked, the proteins begin breaking down immediately. Unlike the protein changes in chicken or eggs, mushroom proteins are uniquely unstable under reheating conditions. Secondary heat exposure triggers rapid oxidation of the polyunsaturated fatty acids in mushroom tissue, producing a compound called malondialdehyde, abbreviated MDA, which is one of the most studied markers of lipid peroxidation in nutritional biochemistry. Research from the Polish Academy of Sciences found that reheated mushrooms exhibited MDA concentrations substantially higher than freshly cooked mushrooms, in some measurements more than 3 times higher. MDA does not remain confined to the gastrointestinal tract after absorption. It enters systemic circulation and undergoes a process called DNA adduct formation. It physically bonds to DNA strands in a way that causes the kind of structural mutation that precedes cancer development. The National Toxicology Program has classified MDA as a clear animal carcinogen with mechanistic evidence considered relevant to human biology. Think of MDA's interaction with DNA the way you might think of a chemical that bonds permanently to a blueprint, altering the instructions it contains. The blueprint, DNA, still exists, but its instructions have been corrupted at specific points. When cells replicate from a corrupted blueprint, the errors propagate. Over time, error accumulation is how cellular dysfunction progresses toward malignancy. The aging-specific compounding factor is DNA repair efficiency. Research from the Buck Institute for Research on Aging shows that by 75, cellular DNA repair capacity is approximately 50% lower than it was at 45. This means damage that would be caught and corrected in a younger adult accumulates in an older one. The same MDA exposure produces proportionally greater long-term consequence because the repair system has less capacity to address it. The practical solution requires no compromise on nutrition. Mushrooms cook in 6 to 8 minutes in a pan with a small amount of olive oil and garlic. Cook fresh portions and eat them immediately. Leftover cooked mushrooms can be consumed cold, in a wrap, salad, or grain bowl without reheating. The flavor profile holds well at room temperature or chilled. The pairing recommendation, vitamin D alongside mushrooms. Mushrooms naturally contain ergosterol, a compound that converts to vitamin D when exposed to sunlight, and their vitamin D content interacts synergistically with supplemental or dietary vitamin D3 to activate natural killer cells, the immune system's primary frontline defense against abnormal cell growth. Research at the University of California, San Diego documented significantly enhanced immune surveillance in adults over 65 who consumed mushrooms regularly alongside adequate vitamin D. Fresh mushrooms with a vitamin D-rich food, sardines, salmon, or a supplement, is a pairing with documented immunological benefit. The common thread across all 5 foods on this list is that the reheating risk is not random, it is mechanistically specific. Rice produces heat-stable bacterial toxins that breach a compromised gut barrier. Chicken and reheated animal protein accumulate ages that trigger RAGE receptor inflammation and are cleared less efficiently in older kidneys and liver. Eggs produce oxysterols that are cytotoxic to vascular endothelium and suppress the apoptotic mechanism that removes abnormal cells. Leafy greens produce nitrosamines through a conversion accelerated by the lower gastric acidity that is common in older adults. Mushrooms produce malondialdehyde through lipid peroxidation that damages DNA in a system whose repair capacity has already declined. Each risk is addressable without eliminating these foods from your diet. The interventions are practical. Cook smaller portions more frequently, use appropriate reheating temperatures and methods where reheating is unavoidable, and use specific pairings, turmeric with rice, sulforaphane-rich vegetables with chicken, olive oil and leafy greens with eggs, vitamin C with greens, vitamin D with mushrooms, that provide documented chemical protection against the specific compounds involved. The body at 70 or 75 or 80 is not the same detoxification system it was at 40. That is not a reason for alarm. It is a reason for precision. Understanding specifically which chemical processes are occurring allows for specific and proportionate responses. The kitchen decisions that seemed inconsequential at 35 carry more biological weight at 70 in both directions. The same specificity that makes certain reheating practices problematic makes the protective pairings genuinely effective. The references for every study described today are in the description below.